And I'm still trying to power through this Benji project, the 912 engine swap, putting in a 3.2. Today I'm going to work on some more rust proofing on some of the modifications that were done to the car and really prep it to get the engine installed. With any luck, we might get it started.
Garage time.
I'm routing the wiring inside the engine bay now. You can see this is the factory harness, the gray one. That's from a 1987 Carrera engine. The black one here is the engine harness for the 912. So you can see the difference between a simple carbureted points ignition system to a fully computer controlled ignition and fuel injection system. This is the factory harness, and I have it loose here just to create some access. It normally clips in to these locations right here. But this is where the new harness goes in, and I wasn't able to film, but I did create a little bit of an indent there. Actually, the indent was already there. I just enlarged it a little bit to make room for this harness because they're going side by side. The other challenging thing about this indent, it has to be large enough not only for the wiring, but also for some of the connectors. So I did end up taking the back off that connector. That was a pretty big one to pass through. And then there was one other big one. This connector is for the airflow meter, and it's also quite large. I did drill that hole with this hole saw, and I couldn't film it because you can see the drill doesn't quite fit in there. I had to put weight on the tire. That pushed the trailing arm up and gave me a better shot at drilling that. So I'm going to be using this grommet. This is the factory grommet. And this part here is the ECU connector. The hole has to be big enough to pass this connector through it. And then this grommet will seal it. So clearly the ECU goes in the interior of the car, and it'll go underneath the driver's seat. This is the original fuel line, most likely. Super brittle. Yeah, look at that. I've been doing tons of work under the car, and while the lighting in the shop is better, I have these LED lights. This is the latest from Tan Baby. There's now 5 panels with a center light too, and that's really improved the lighting in here. But when you're working under the car, you're like in the shadows and it's hard to see. So I got something else new that's really been great. I'm already a geek as it is, but check this out. This wearable LED is flexible, it's got a spotlight on there, and it's actually motion activated. So all you gotta do is wave your hand next to it. It turns on and off. It's got 2 different settings for brightness. And when you're working under the car, it's basically shining the light right where you need it because that's where your eyes are. So this has been a real saver on the bottom. It's actually good for safety too, because what I've been doing is I've been holding the light with one hand and a tool in the other, and I'm constantly, needing a third hand. Well, this basically solves that problem. 1, I can see what I'm doing, and 2, it frees up my hands to be safer with like rotating tools and stuff. So check these out. I'll put a link in the description below. This is well worth it. Battery operated, rechargeable. I removed the stock voltage regulator from here and replaced it with this aluminum plate. It's just a simple bar with 2 holes in it. That's gonna allow me to attach the fuel filter. A slight change of plans. I changed the hardware here to go the other direction, so this fits flush. because I don't want the hardware to poke a hole in the canister. So this will sit like that, and it'll have this pad behind the filter, and then a hose clamp goes inside that. Just like that. There's a little piece of rubber behind there, so this is cushioned against vibration and vibrating loose. For best results, I shoot this out of a Miguel's Jr. fast food cup. And this is looking pretty good. It's obviously not white, and I don't think the inner fenders on this car should be white. It's supposed to be black. So I'll leave it up to Benji how he wants to remedy that. But this basically has the correct texture, and you really can't tell that this was modified. This looks like a factory indent, if you ask me. Raptor liner is really hard to clean, so I use carb cleaner as a solvent, because if you don't, you're pretty much not going to be able to clean the gun. It's really strong stuff. These parts have been sitting in paint thinner, and it pretty much won't even touch it. The liquid is still clear. Okay, I think I got it. That's the last of the cleaning. That's about 30 minutes to clean the Raptor gun. It's not easy, and that's fully disassembling it, or mostly fully disassembling it. So now I'm off to McDonald's. That's my break room. I call it the break room. Get some iced tea, let this dry. It looks fantastic. I sprayed inside here too, and this came out pretty nice as well. You really can't tell where the 912 mounts were and where the new 911 mounts are, so gotta be happy with this. And I also replaced this fuel line here right near the transaxle. That's all I can think of for the prep work on the car. We got the electrical, the fuel, the oil lines, everything's ready to go. So now it's time to put the engine in. Okay, now we got to separate the trans from the old 912 motor. I think I'll take the starter off too, just to make it a little lighter. The other reason for taking the starter off is I want to make sure that this ring gear is going to mate up with the new flywheel. So I'm going to take a measurement from the end of the ring gear or end of the flywheel to the surface. 35.2 millimeters. There we go. Here's the rarely seen view of the back of this 3.2 engine, and I want to show you what makes this work with the 901 transaxle. So this is a custom product made by Kennedy Engineering Products. This is their pressure plate and flywheel combo, and this is what allows it to convert it to a push style clutch. So the throwout bearing is going to push on these forks, and that's what engages and disengages the clutch. The clutch disc is already in there. This is a 228 millimeter disc, which means it's larger than the 901 discs normally. That allows it to handle more torque. So this will absolutely handle the torque of the 3.2. This gear right here is the one the starter works on, and then the teeth behind there isn't a gear. That's actually what measures the speed of the crankshaft. This is the speed sensor, and then there's another sensor back here that measures once every revolution. This one measures many times per revolution. I think it's 130 times a revolution. You get a signal. We are gonna have to clearance the transaxle for these sensors right here, because the original 67 transaxle never had crank position sensors. When you push the clutch in, that pushes the pressure plate in. This rides on a bearing, throwout bearing right there. So this spins on these forks. It'll make contact to these forks right here, which will disengage the clutch disc. Just sprayed a little super clean on here. So just kind of cleaning the section I need to cut. You know, this is the most controversial part of this swap is, you know, keeping the 901. So it might be short-lived either because it fails or Benji decides to upgrade to the 915. But for now, we're just gonna make it work and, you know, take it easy. He wants to get this car imported to the Philippines and this should get him there. This was actually a strip of sandpaper and I had it there on the flywheel like this with the sandpaper side to the teeth. So it's going to go like this in here so I can cut this out. The distance of the paper is exactly the distance where these mounting holes are. So that's how I transfer the pattern just like that. This is adhesive back paper so I can just stick it right on. That's a lot to cut out. I'm gonna probably do a little bit less than that, probably stay within 1/8 of an inch to that, and then fit it to the engine, make sure I'm not cutting too much off. Probably easiest to start with some holes. Yeah, like I said, it was a conservative cut, so I'm probably a little too close for comfort on that one. That's probably gonna touch, and I don't know exactly, you know, how it's gonna float once it gets fully mated onto the transaxle. So it looks like I can go down on this one, just probably 1/8 inch. And on this one, probably another 1/16 of an inch or so. So just make this thing taller. It's, I purposely have no sharp corners on this because that creates stress concentrations and you really want to have a fluid shape to avoid any extra stress on this cut part. Also, instead of cutting up here at the top, I decided to just remove that sensor. It's actually not used. And this bracket's a little bit loose. So if I have to cut anything, I will, but it's easier to just deal with one at a time. Yeah, we'll try again. I think that'll do it. I get 36.8. It's a little bit deeper. I think it was 35 last time, so we're about a millimeter difference, but as far as ring gears go, I'm sure it'll start just fine. Okay, I'm happy with the clearance there. The fit with the sensors is great. And I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I also clearanced the top of the transaxle. There's a little pin or peg that hangs down, and that would prevent the transaxle from being separated. But I clearanced it. It's going to be no issue at all. Just try to keep it lined up. You can put some gloves on if you want. Zach's gone inside. I had to reposition this front mount area here, and I've put the jack in with the big block of wood to raise the transaxle high enough so I can get this scissor jack that kind of goldish one there, underneath the cross member here at the front. That allows me to tilt the transaxle up because we need to get the selector shaft. That shaft there has to go inside the hole. So by turning the scissor jack, I can raise that just a little bit higher. Once it gets high enough to go inside the hole, then we can push the whole engine towards the front of the car, and that's gonna get it into the proper position. Okay, so it should just go right back now. Yep. We'll take some of that angle back out. The front two bolts at the transmission are in, so I'm gonna knock out these wheels, and the back of the engine's still on its dolly. Okay, we just lower the car down a little more. We get the rear bolts in. We might have to remove this because I'm not sure how the muffler's fitting. Looks like we got some interference with the muffler right now. The bolts here in the corners are in, but I'm afraid to take the weight off of these because it needs to have the cupped washer to support the weight, and that might just fall right through if I don't put the correct washers on. Okay, I couldn't find the correct cupped washers for the motor mounts, but I did find these big washers. These are for the front struts, and I'm not using them. So I'm just gonna put them in now because that'll spread the load over the motor mount and it'll keep the engine from falling out. So it's best to put something in there. We'll swap them out with the correct stuff later. Ta-da, the engine's in. Everything looks good. We have nothing, pinched or broken or, damaged in any way. Everything just is loose, needs to be connected. So it's the clutch cable, axles, of course, wires. The fuel lines are fine. The existing fuel line and the new fuel line are fine. I got some new bushings for the throttle bell crank. I'm gonna take a break for the night and I need to get the 356 in, so I'm gonna put the tires on, put it all the way down. Okay, this should be interesting. So as you'd expect, it's sitting a little lower in the rear. It's extra weight. But it's actually not too bad. I do have some stronger torsion bars for the rear that are actually from a Carrera. So we'll swap those out at some point, but for now, it's fine. I've been out here for a couple hours just connecting stuff, like the clutch cable, the speedometer cable, the oil lines, the fuel lines, all the things, the electrical, to get this thing to fire up. And I really wanted to fire it up tonight, but it looks like I ran into a roadblock at the front of the car. Okay, here at the front of the car, the fuel pump is still mounted temporarily. That's the location, but I don't have the bracket for it yet. I do have the fuel line that goes from the tunnel to the fuel pump, and the return line is what the problem is. The return has to go back into the tank, and I can't get this plug out right here. I actually broke a hex key off in it, and it's stuck, it's frozen, I can't get it off. So probably gonna have to take the tank out, and it's a very specialized fitting anyways. That's where I'm stuck, guys. I won't be able to start it up tonight, unfortunately. Oil lines aren't clamped down yet, but this is how they run. This one goes right to the oil tank, and then this one here goes underneath right to the engine. That's the connection to the engine. And I think this clamp here, I don't think that's stock, but I could probably bolt that right there. That makes sense. That's what came with the engine. So this line's connected. I actually did put the oil back in the tank. So this is the supply line to the engine. That's how it gets the oil to the oil pump. Oh, another thing I realized, this heater duct is just a tiny bit too short. It just needs a longer one. It looks like it'll fit, it's the right size, but just a little too short. The engine bay is pretty much ready to go. The wiring is connected, but it's not routed correctly. It's just here to get the thing started. Once I get the wiring finalized, I will go back and manage all the cabling so it's tidy and not rubbing on anything and not conflicting with anything. Also, some of the 912 wiring is not connected. Some of it won't get connected, some of it will. So I'll explain exactly what wires to use and not to use. As much as I would like to take it around the block, I can't. So thank you again for watching. This is in real time. So what you're seeing is gonna be uploaded tomorrow. I'm not just showing you guys the good stuff. I'm showing you guys what I'm actually going through.